Nothing yet.
Maybe not things that normally bloom that time of year, but there were things in bloom. So now is the time to start prepping them. The first thing that you want to do is to start by cleaning the leaves off. So if you've got some real lemon, take a little real lemon on a paper towel.
Is that really lemon in there?
Yep.
Okay.
Really lemon juice.
Is that?
What about lime juice?
Anything that's slightly acidic, vinegar would probably work.
Make them smell like oranges.
No, it's not
Too
gonna make
sticky?
them like oranges, but a lot of times you'll get plants that have water spots on the leaves, and it's usually a calcium deposit, which doesn't just come off if you wipe it. But if you take a little bit of lime juice or lemon juice or even orange juice, some people will use milk, but anything that's a little bit acidic,
I think Carol uses mayonnaise.
and then wipe it back down, those marks go away. So you'll have nice green foliage for the show. Yeah.
Is that? Or is that
That's
just
actually insecticide.
Oh, that's insecticide.
But clean your foliage up, because the whole presentation in the exhibit, you don't want anything to detract from the natural beauty of things. So you really want to make sure that your foliage looks good. It's not just about the flowers. The judging may be just about the flowers, but the whole exhibit is about everything. So clean up your foliage. If you have a plant that has some questionable foliage like this, get rid of those leaves, because it just detracts from the display. That looks so much better than it did before. And it may seem terrible, but this plant's deciduous anyway, so I mean it's going to lose those leaves. So clean up your foliage, pull off the dead stuff. If there's old flower stems, clip those off. Get your plant as presentable as possible. There's another thing I wanted to point out on this, is that there's another sheath here, and if you look closely in there, those buds are dead. Okay, so that's sort of detracting. If they were going to bloom, I'd leave it on. But those are never going to bloom. They've already rotted in there. So clip that off. Get rid of that stuff. If you have a plant that you want to get looked at for judging, spray it down with a squirt bottle. Really good. Get all this stuff here wet, and it will peel off a lot nicer and cleaner when it's wet. And if you'll get rid of that stuff, it can add a couple of points to your overall score of the presentation of the plants. So clean up your cattleyas, clean that stuff off. If it's green, leave it there. But if it's brown, go ahead and get it off. It will come off nicer and cleaner if you will wet it first. You can also rub it a little bit with a paper towel. Don't scrub and scour, because you can damage the tissue underneath. But again, just get rid of all the stuff that's going to detract. Brown stuff detracts. Okay. The next thing is about presentation of the flowers themselves. If you have a cattleya like this that has 4 flower buds coming on, you might want to stake that up so that you can start to separate these flower buds so that they don't all compete with one another. A really easy way to do it is just to take some cotton and start to push them apart, so that as they harden off, they are separated from one another. So that's a possibility for you. Also, when cattleyas open, the 2 sepals don't always open out all the way, or the 2 petals don't always open out as far as you'd like. And again, some people will sort of put a little bit of cotton in there to help push them back a little flatter, because judges are looking for big,
In the flower.
yeah, big, flat, round, and dark. Those are the key things to getting award points. Don't ask me why.
That camellia that I got at Christmas, it was in bud, and it came out, and all 4 flowers are like
Oh, really?
this. Yeah. I found out too late. That's what I
Yeah.
should have done.
But a little bit of prep now can make your presentation look a lot better later. With something like a phalaenopsis, they should be spiking now. Hopefully they'll be booming for the show. But this is the time that you want to put a stem in here. It just helps support this, because right now it doesn't have hardly any buds on it. But when it gets a dozen or more flower buds in here, this is going to start to get heavy, and that's a pretty thin stem. So it's going to want to droop way down. This is the time to stake it. When you stake your plants, this would be a little excessive. Okay? For that particular thing, this might be more the key. And notice that this one is green already, so I don't have to camouflage it. But if you just put a little hook in the end of it, normally I would do this with pliers, but since I forgot my pliers. If you just put a little hook like that in it, you can stick it down in the pot. Get it past the bark. And then you can sort of train this wire to follow a natural arch of the flower stem. And that right there can just hook the flower stem to support it. But a nice graceful arch is what you're looking for. All you want to do is support it so it doesn't break when it's heavy with flowers. Some of you may have a phragmipedium that would have multiple flowers in bloom. If you'll take a little bit of floral tape, this is floral tape. You can pick it up at any hobby shop, or any florist might even just give you some. Society may have some in their magic bin of stuff. But with a little bit of floral tape, you can tape several wires together so that I can make one little bend in here to support the lower flower, and another bend here to support the next flower up. So that I can support a whole series of flowers. If
That's why we pay 'em.
Phragmipedium, their flowers tend to nod way down and they don't present well. But if you'll put up something like this to pull that flower up so that it's looking at the judges, that can also help in the presentation. Another thing with the floral wire and stakes, this silver wire here is going to detract from the exhibit. You don't want anything to draw your eye away from the plant and the flower. So if you were using this to put your plant in, just go ahead and hit that with floral tape so that you turn it green and it makes it go away. You should probably also get rid of the label up here, because that's going to detract from it. But this particular one, make sure you write that label down somewhere else. So again, you're just looking for things that are going to present the flowers well and not anything loud and obtrusive to draw your eye away from that thing.
Becca,
Yeah.
I have a fail spike. I just found it. The trouble is the spike is,
All over the place.
no, it's just coming out. It's,
Yeah, that's what they do.
so
And
I can't push it up.
they're very fragile at this stage, so move it up very gradually.
Okay.
Just, go a couple inches at a time. So move it up, stake it. A couple days later, move it up a little bit more and stake it up. You may have to find that because it's already come out so far that I can't train it up from this point. I've got to train it up from that point.
Because it's about that long.
Yeah, and just remember that they are very fragile. Don't overdo. Always just do a little bit at a time. Let it adjust to that, because it's all about water pressure in that very brittle stem. And if you bend it too far, the water pressure says snap, and the game's over. And then you'll say, oh, I got to wait till next year, or go buy another orchid. So this is one that I wanted to point out. This is not a good staking job for a couple reasons. One, it has this hideous thing on here. A little piece of floral tape would be much more appropriate and make that pink thing, which contrasts with the flower, go away. Also, it's staked much above the flower. And in reality, it's an awfully big diameter for what it's needed. That would again be better done with one of these pieces of floral wire. If you don't have the floral wire, this should certainly be cut off just back here. Also, when you're staking up flowers, you want to make sure that you do it early, because this flower was actually hanging down here. That's the way the flower should be presented. As I start to stake it up, it's now upside down or crooked. So again, do it early on and you won't have those problems. Some flowers will just hold themselves up naturally and you don't have to worry about it. Others are a little more problematic. This is one that it was fine up until I brought it here, and now the flowers are flopping over. So just because they look fine now doesn't mean you shouldn't stake it up, because you're going to be putting it in the car. It's going to bounce all over the place before it gets to the show. I forgot to bring my snip, so I'm cheating.
You put Edgar on YouTube or something?
Facebook.
Oh.
All of you are going to be there.
We'll all vote.
So now the flowers, no matter what happens, they're going to be supported. Hopefully it's early enough that this flower might twist and become the presentation that it should be. The same with this one. But if I tweaked around with that and had a pair of pliers, I could get them to point the right direction, clip off any extra wire. And you know, you don't really need these big hooks in here. If you just use a little piece of floral tape, you can just tape it to the thing, and then the rest of that wire goes away.
How long should these flowers last?
They generally last about 3 to 4 weeks. Depends on the temperature and whether you've sprayed them with water and all sorts of things. The white ones don't tend to hold up quite as long because they bruise like nobody's business, and they'll get botrytis on them if you've sprayed them with water.
Yeah, I have this color, and as I told you, 2 of them, and they only lasted a couple of weeks max.
Yeah,
So-
again, it depends
Maybe it's
on
a
how
bit
dry the
more.
area is and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff, temperatures. If you have a plant that has leaves, like a lot of the oncidiums will have brown tips on the leaves, again, clip those off. Take a sterile pair of snips, so a different set of snips for each plant, and clip the leaf so that it still remains a natural leaf shape. Don't just clip it off straight, because that looks awful. But if you'll clip it off with a nice new tip on it, with really sharp scissors so that you don't leave huge, big, brown, jagged cuts in it, that also will help your exhibit out a lot.
And should you try and take this off down here on this line?
Yeah, and any of that brown stuff that you can get off, it doesn't come off of Lycastes as easily, but any of that kind of stuff you can. A couple other things that you should do is you should make a second plant tag. So on this one here, I would pull this out of the pot. I would rewrite that name on the new tag, and I would make sure that my new tag was a little bit shorter than the pot is high. Then I would shove the new name all the way down there, out of sight. And that way later on, if this one has disappeared, when it comes back from the show, you'll still know what your plant was. But you know, this way there's a tag there so that whoever's putting up the exhibit can make sure they have the right tag with the right plant. They will either put this underneath the pot or tuck it down into the pot somehow, but always keep a second tag in there if you're bringing a plant to the show, because tags tend to disappear and it's really annoying later because it was a special plant and now you don't know what it is. So if you can put a second tag on it, and you know when the Easter Seal sends you all those return address things, put one of those on your pot somewhere so that whoever's setting up the exhibit later on can make sure that your plant gets back to you.
Yeah, that's so important.
And because it's chaos at the end of the show, and anything you can do to simplify things is helpful. So make sure that your plant is labeled as yours.
It's chaos at the setting up the show.
Well, that's it. I had a plant in our show last year that when I came back on Monday to tear my exhibit down, it wasn't in my exhibit. And
But I think you did find it.
I did find it. It went from my exhibit, it ended up in Angeli and Prayul's exhibit. So whoever put it back in the exhibit table put it on the wrong table. And Angeli and Prayul got it back to Chicago, and then they took it to the Batavia show on their sales table. And Angeli said, "That's not my plant, that's Edgar's plant."
Oh, well, at least she
And
knew.
so she put it under her table, and then she took it back to Chicago, and then the following weekend she took it to Lansing, Michigan, and gave it back to me. It's a very well-traveled
I
plant, but
didn't
it's
realize it was that involved. I thought you got it like within
yeah,
the
no,
next
it's
week.
it's got frequent flyer miles. So yeah, I would never would have gotten that back if it didn't have my name on it. So the point is, make sure your name and address and telephone
So she
number.
just
is
didn't
on the
recognize it and go, oh, that looks like Edgar's plant.
plant. She was probably thinking that's not good enough to be one of mine.
No.
I'm sure that's it.
So just clean your foliage up, stake them up now. Once you've staked them up, remember to keep them oriented to the light in the same direction constantly. Because this Phalaenopsis, for instance, the flowers orient towards the light. If you go turning it every time you water it and putting it back a different direction, your plant will be looking in all different directions. And most of the plants you want all the flowers to face one direction. So try to keep them oriented to the light the same way from this point onwards. Any questions?
I have a suggestion to those people bringing plants. See how Edgar has this plant in this other pot? Probably because this one's going to fall over. Please do that when you bring your plants to our show, so that Carol or Diane and Carol and I are flopping all over the place, and we can't
And
figure
if
out.
it's exceptionally heavy, don't hesitate to put it in a couple of clay pots, one bigger than the next, bigger than the next, because,
Otherwise, we have to
you-
borrow
yeah, yeah.
pots off of Edgar, take them away from his exhibits.
You don't want a damaged plant coming back to you, and nobody wants to have the guilty feeling of, oh my God, I ruined her plant. So, yeah, definitely make sure your plants are stable in the pot. Any other?
What about-
So make sure you bring plants.
Yeah.
We need plants for the exhibit.
So with the successive blooming frag, ideally you get it with the first 2 or 3 flowers, but what if you're at 10 or 15?
Way up on the flower stem?
Do you just not bring it, or?
No,
It
I mean,
could be
if
buried
it's
in-
presenting well, because a lot of times, especially in these big exhibits, they can put the plant down behind something and just the flowers are poking up. So it might fill in a spot somewhere. If it's in bloom and a nice looking plant, I would say bring it regardless.
'Cause I think
The judges may look at that and say, well, I'm not seeing it in its prime, so I'm not gonna pull it for judging, but it may still really add a lot to the exhibit. And you'd be surprised how many entries, there's 100 entries in those exhibits, and a lot of them never even get a first place ribbon because there isn't anything in the category. So, when in doubt, bring it. They can always put it on the overflow table if it doesn't fit in the exhibit somewhere.
Back to the cat. Do you have some handy dandy way of knowing that that sheath is dry?
If you look at it with bright light behind it, seeing as I have a smartphone now.
I was gonna say, you got there.
No, I didn't get there.
Oh.
What makes that happen anyway?
If you look through there,
Yeah.
can you see that those are brown and that they're separated from each other? They're dead.
All right.
This got badly damaged in transit.
Oh, okay.
So that particular one I just clip off.
Let me see. You sure? Sometimes I will split this open.
Yeah, and if you're in doubt, then go ahead and take a sharp knife, clip the end of this a little bit, and then you can separate the two halves, pull it open, and you'll see that that's brown and
Ew,
rotten.
yeah.
Okay?
I was gonna say it's like opening a diaper to a baby.
Yeah.
It looks like a
I
what?
was like, oh, it looks like opening a diaper for a baby.
Oh, a diaper. I thought you said it looked like an opening of a dead bird. I thought, what
No.
did she open?
Okay,
What do you spend your time
So now,
opening at
doesn't that
home?
look better?
Yes.
that looks a lot
Okay,
better.
so, also get rid of the extra things like this. Just anything that detracts from your plant. And don't put a bright red one or a black one or something on there in this place. Try to use green for your colors. Remember that the pots themselves are gonna get covered with something in the exhibit, so you don't need to worry about scrubbing your pot. That being said, if it's got 2 inches of mud on the side of it.
So mud, we're not putting it in. Get the mud off.
So that, it's not rocket science or anything, just the whole idea is you don't want one really ugly, dirty Charlie Brown plant in the exhibit, and you certainly don't want it to be your plant. So clean them all up so that they all look good for the show, and this is what I was talking about on these leaves. On this one here, this whole leaf is starting to yellow, so I might just clip that whole leaf off because it's at its end. Otherwise, I would clip it off into nice healthy green tissue with still a nice leaf-shaped point at the end.
You would do that the night before,
Yeah, generally just before you take it to the show. The other thing is, if it's going to be really cold when you're bringing your plants to the show, make sure you bundle them up. Remember buying goldfish at the pet store? They put them in a plastic bag, they blow a little air in, and they twist the bag and they put a rubber band over it. You can do that with your plants. Put them in a plastic bag like that. Set the whole thing in a box. The big air foil around it makes its own little greenhouse getting it to the show. If you think that the flowers are bouncing around in a box, put something protective around the flower so that it doesn't get bruised on the way to the show. Because you really want everything to look absolutely pristine at the show.
What would you suggest, like, for watering a couple days beforehand? Because it's gonna be there for.
exhibit halls tend to be very dry.
Yeah.
So if you can water your plant the day before you're bringing it to the show, so that it's not so wet that it's gonna rot out the bottom of your cardboard box on the way there, but it has enough water that nobody has to mess with it at the show. Again, that's very helpful. Little tiny things like this might get misted at the show, but they're not gonna water 4-inch pots. That's out of the question. So little mounted things, make sure they're all well hydrated. The big things, make sure they're well watered just before you bring them. Good question. All right, well, I hope everybody brings something to the show, because we're putting in a 5,000 square foot exhibit.
And I'm gonna send Frank an email. You may not be coming, but we want your plants.
Oh, that's a good idea, because